Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk about some of the many stories that have been appearing in the press in the last week or so, many of which are about the various things that are the consequences of Brexit, and they don't paint a very happy picture, all in all. But before I do that, I need to ask you a small favour. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, because if you do that, then YouTube give you a sort of silver plaque thing to go on your wall, and in order to get that, I just need another 63,000 subscribers. And so, if you haven't already subscribed, or if you know of anybody you think might be interested in what I have to say, I really would be grateful if you'd either subscribe or pass on my name. So the first thing I wanted to mention this week is that the government have decided, it would appear, to delay imposing import controls on goods coming from the EU. This is the fifth time they will have done this. And the reason is perfectly clear, that once they start imposing controls, then European suppliers are going to be reluctant to come here. And they're going to put the prices up, the transport's going to get more expensive because there are going to be delays and so on. And it's going to generally have a negative impact on the economy, and particularly on food prices and food shortages. And it seems to me, as I suggested last week, I think that the government are trying to string this out until they lose the election and Labour take over, and then it'll be their mess to sort out. But it is coming sooner or later, and we do get 1/3 of our food from the EU, so it's pretty important that somehow or other these controls are introduced, and that we adapt to cope with them. The people who are going to lose most of all, of course, the smuggling industry, because the amount of smuggling that must have been going on since we left the EU must be extraordinary, because it's just open borders. It's called taking back control, apparently. Going the other way, of course, is terrific controls and all sorts of paperwork and documents and all the rest. Now, there's something called the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, and this is a group of purchasing managers who do surveys on how much companies are buying in terms of materials and so on for manufacturing. It gives a very good indication of attitudes towards future business, and if people are buying a lot of raw materials and so on, they're optimistic about the future. They announced a few days ago that their latest report suggests that we're about to face the sharpest fall in Britain's business activity since 2008, which is quite worrying. We do, of course, still have just about the highest inflation in Europe, and investment into this UK has more or less dried up. In fact, it was even negative in 2021. People are not investing in the UK. I don't think people have got any confidence in the UK any longer. Nonetheless, according to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, we're still going to become a world-class technology superpower. Now, one of the things that's really important to becoming a world-class superpower is semiconductors. And America some time ago announced that they were investing $53 billion in semiconductor research. The EU, in order to match this, they said that they would invest $42 billion in semiconductor research, and the Chinese, who knows what they're investing, but certainly they're not going to allow themselves to fall behind. They're almost certainly investing similar amounts. We, on the other hand, are investing £1 billion spread over 10 years. So I think ideas about us standing shoulder to shoulder with the three big groups in the world, China, America, and the EU, a bit fanciful, probably. In 2005, we were the third biggest manufacturers of supercomputers. We're now 10th. We're behind US, Japan, China, Finland, Italy, Germany, France, South Korea, and Russia. And so everybody's overtaking us. And here we are, all on our own global Britain, and we're going to show the world how it's done. We have massive government debt. It's gone up from 1.03 trillion in 2010 to 2.58 trillion now. It's risen by 40% since 2019. In other words, we're not making enough money. We are spending much, much more than we are earning, and we're getting more and more into debt. That cannot go on. There has to come a point where we're not going to be able to pay our debts, or our debt's going to get a lot more expensive. And incidentally, we're paying more interest per capita than any other advanced country. In other words, all this huge borrowing is costing us more and more and more. And there's so many, and I mean, you can see, you don't have to really go into any detail again, but you can see how many businesses were so badly affected by Brexit, small businesses in particular. I mean, last week, for example, there was a story about 100 small brewers have gone out of business, small brewers who used to export to the EU because they can no longer cope with the paperwork. It just it's too much. And you know, as I said before, this paperwork, it's not the problem, the paperwork at this end. We can fill out all the forms that they want to throw at us this end, but it's the other end. It's importers in the EU. This is the vital point, that importers throughout the EU do not want to have to do all this paperwork. Especially if you're small businesses, you don't want all this small paperwork and hassle and employing agents and registering with the government and paying VAT and duty in advance and all the rest of it. If you can buy somewhere else without any of that, and of course within the EU there's none of this paperwork. It's just one big market. Musicians, another area that has been very, very, very badly affected. And if you think of how important the music industry or the arts generally have been for us, if you think back from the Beatles through to all these fantastic world famous groups that all started off in the UK, got a bit of a reputation, then started touring in the EU, fantastic experience, and did really well, and from then became world class stars. Well, now you can't. Now it is too much. Too expensive, too difficult, too complicated for small upcoming groups to perform in the EU. It's a terrible loss. It's absolutely insane. And even other things, things like Sotheby's, their profits have collapsed this year, and they say it's down to Brexit. They actually directly blame Brexit. We have nitrogen. We have a nitrogen plant in this country. Now, nitrogen is an extremely important chemical. It's used in fertilizers, and it makes a huge difference to product yield. And it's vital. And we had just one plant in this in the UK, and it's closing. So now we're going to be relying upon imports of nitrogen for our agriculture. And where are we going to be importing from? EU, India, who knows? But it's just one more instance whereby taking back control, we're depending upon foreigners. The science brain drain is continuing because scientists want to go and work with Horizon and in the EU. And when we were messing about over Northern Ireland, the EU said, well, we're not going to let you rejoin Horizon until we get this sorted out. It was sorted out, and then Sunak was told, okay, you can come back in. And there was going to be a price for it, and he's humming and ahhing, thinking about the price, whether or not to pay it or not. And I think they're going to start hassling about the cost. In the meantime, people are just leaving. Scientists are leaving. There's so much, as I've said on other occasions, there's so many young people who see better opportunities elsewhere, and then they're just going to flood away. I mean, why would you stay here with all this hassle and this terrible, terrible government? And right now, Kemi Badenoch, she's off to India, isn't she? Or I think she might even be in India at the moment, and she's negotiating a deal with India. And I think the Indians, they're smart, the Indians, very well educated, clever people, particularly good at business, and they must look at the UK and they see the deal we did with Australia and New Zealand, whereby the Australians and New Zealanders are openly laughing at what a bad deal we got, how desperate we were. And then this arrogant, aggressive, horrible woman, Badenoch, went off to New Zealand to sign the CPTPP deal, which is going to add 0.08% to our GDP in 10 years' time if we're lucky. That's compared with the 4% we've lost by leaving the EU. And the Indians are just going to be looking at this woman. They're going to look at us. They think we're so desperate. They'll look at the deals we've tried to do before, the pathetic deals, and they'll say, we've got them in the palm of our hands. They'll have any deal they want. And of course, Sunak's desperate to get a deal because we need deals. And no doubt any deal that we do get will involve huge numbers of visas for Indians to come and work in the UK. So I wanted to talk also about, when the fire engine's gone, I wanted to talk about asylum. Now in 2010, there were 7,720 people waiting for decisions from the Home Office. Now that we've taken back control, in 13 years, that figure has gone up to 175,500. There are 175,500 people waiting for answers from the Home Office to whether or not they can stay here. Most of them will get they'll be allowed to stay, but as Generic made clear the other day, if they process them quickly, that'll encourage more to come. So they're deliberately holding them up. So we have all these. Well, nearly 200,000 people, which we're having to accommodate, who are not allowed to work. They could be working, we're desperate for workers, they could be working, they could be paying taxes, and we could even be making a profit out of them whilst they're waiting. But no, they all have to stay either in prison or in hotels or whatever, until such time as the Home Office decides it's they can process them. And we're being told all the time it's costing £6 million a day. And the funny thing is that having sent home all these dreadful Europeans, these French, Spanish, Italian, Germans, and all these awful people, those Romanians used to work in our care homes, dreadful people, got rid of all of them, we're now desperately short of workers. And what's the government doing? They're advertising for young people, 18 to 30, to come and work in the UK. To replace all the ones we've managed to get rid of. Do you know where they're advertising? Argentina, Chile, South Korea, Sweden, Poland, Czechia, Luxembourg, Denmark, Switzerland and Norway. Several of those European countries, several EU countries. So we've got rid of all the EU people. The people from the EU, which caused us, dragged us down and held us back all those years. Got rid of all them. Now we're advertising for replacements. In many cases from the same countries. And when you look at the visas that have been granted, it's quite interesting. It gives you a very good idea of how things are changing in terms of having got rid of Europeans and what we're replacing them with. 321,000 work visas were issued, I think, last year. That's 45% up on the previous year. And they are principally from India, USA and Pakistan. In the healthcare sector, the number of visas issued is up 157%, and they're mostly from India, Nigeria and Zimbabwe. People coming here to study, and probably mostly in our top universities, I would imagine, that's up 23%. They're from India, China and Nigeria. And family visas, that's where people have got relatives already working here, who are allowed to stay here, and they want to bring their families along. That's up 110%, and they're mostly from Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. So all these people who voted to get rid of all these awful Europeans, these, as I say, these Italians and French and German, awful people coming over here using the NHS, taking our jobs, all the jobs that we didn't want to do, they're all going to be replaced by all these people from Africa and from the Indian subcontinent. And I think there are going to be communities, because, what happens when you get whole groups of people coming from one country into a new country? They tend to live near each other. So you're going to get, I think, as we've got in other, we know about Bradford and Leicester and Southall and London and so on, you're going to get huge communities of these foreigners who are not going to integrate in as well as Europeans did in the past. And I think a lot of people are going to be very upset about this. And I think this is going to probably lead to quite a lot of tension. But we've taken back control, so that's the main thing. Now, in other news last week, Sunak, he gave evidence to the liaison committee a few weeks ago, and he inadvertently forgot to tell them, or denied the fact that a scheme that he was promoting would benefit one of his wife's companies. It was inadvertent. It's funny how when politicians make mistakes, it's inadvertent. You know how that poor Mr. Zahawi, he inadvertently forgot to pay 3.5 million in tax. I mean, if I inadvertently fail to pay £100 in tax, they'll be all over me. We pay letters coming in brown envelopes every other week, and I'd be taken to court. But 3.5 million, if it's inadvertent, it's okay. And so Sunak inadvertently forgot to tell them about his wife's benefiting. He also there's questions about whether or not he's benefited from Moderna, because all of his investments were put into a blind trust when he became a minister. And so he hasn't got control of them, but he does know what's there, really, and he knows that there are substantial investments in Moderna, and I think his wife has also got investments in Moderna. And their shares, as a result of COVID, went up by 372%. So he would have quadrupled his money if he kept those shares. And whether he knew about that or not, nobody knows. And it is interesting as to why a Prime Minister's wife, who's so wealthy, whose father is one of the wealthiest men in India, why is she messing about in little businesses here? You know, this thing that he said he inadvertently forgot to mention was something to do with some sort of childcare thing. She was involved in some gym, some Digby Fitness it was called, this business that it got money during the pandemic. It got the furlough payments and so on, and probably, I don't know whether it got any bounce back loans or not. But anyway, shortly after the pandemic, it went bust, leaving a few £1 million worth of creditors, including £430,000 for the tax man. And she was a director. She actually signed the statement of affairs confirming that they couldn't pay their bills. And you just, what is she doing this for? What are they doing? What the hell's he Prime Minister for anyway? So rich, and he's so useless at being Prime Minister. And we know, of course, he had his green card, didn't he? And we know that they're almost certainly planning to shoot off to America. I mean, if everything goes pear-shaped as far as they're concerned, they're fine. Just go off to California. She's given all this money to this school, which seems to be a perfect school for her daughters. A couple of other things that I noticed last week. It was reported that Truss, you remember her? The sort of wishy-washy, insignificant, slightly irritating, stupid woman. She spent, while she was Foreign Secretary, £1.8 million on private flights. 20 trips. Each flight cost £90,000. We paid for that. £90,000 a flight as Foreign Secretary. And you remember, it gives you an idea what sort of woman she is, about that very, very expensive lunch she tried to get. She tried to buy lunch for I think, a Foreign Secretary of Australia in some private club, and it was going to cost £4,000. I think they eventually negotiated it down to £1,500. She's got very expensive tastes. And you remember when she went to, I think, Dawny Wood, the Grace and Favour house for foreign secretaries. She after she left, went to stay. I think after she stepped down as Prime Minister, she left, and they presented her with a bill for towels and bathrobes that were missing. I mean, how small-minded and nasty and petty can you be? And how greedy can you be to spend taxpayers' money so loosely? £1.8 million on flights. She was only Foreign Secretary for a short while. HMRC, they're moving to some new offices in Newcastle. 9,000 employees apparently going to work in these offices, huge offices it seems. And they're owned, as it happens, by a Tory donor. But apparently the property is owned by a company in a tax haven. So the HMRC are going to be paying rent to somebody who's, well, they're not going to pay much tax because all the money's in a tax haven. So it's nice to know that we're keeping all these very rich people, protecting their interests in tax havens. And once again, as I said last week, we're talking about test and trace, 30 billion, PPE, 15 billion, bounce back loans, 17 billion, and Truss and Kwarteng apparently cost us 74 billion. I mean, that's over 130 billion between the four of them, all utter incompetence. And as I say every week, there are people who can't afford to feed their children, people going to food banks, people who are really, really struggling, worry about the mortgage, people who've got into debt, massive debt on credit cards and various loans in order just to survive, but who sooner or later are all going to have to face the music, and probably quite soon. And just a few other things I noticed to finish off with. I mean, this is something quite extraordinary that you wouldn't have believed possible at any time in the past. the Liberal Democrats asked for water companies to stop dumping sewage in the sea over the bank holiday. Now, they didn't say whether or not they approved of them dumping it for the rest of the year, but can you imagine it? We've got so used to, we're so accepting that water companies dump their sewage in the sea all the time that we have to ask them specially to do us a favour and not dump it so as people can go swimming and perhaps not get quite as ill as they would get if they were still dumping the sewage. It's just amazing. And I was looking at Thames Water. Their debt when they took over was zero. They had no debt at all. Their debt is now 14.7 billion, and since they've been running it, they've taken out 7.2 billion in dividends, and 2.1 billion in wages and salaries. I mean, 7 billion is half of what they've borrowed. And we're the mugs. They're telling us in order for them to clear things up and stop dumping sewage in the rivers and seas, we're going to have to pay more. I think it's £30 a head, I think, in the London area. A couple of other small things. I noticed an article about school trips. School trips are virtually stopped now. It was quite an important part of growing up that you had a school trip to Paris or something, or to Brussels, whatever. That's all apparently ended now. It's just too complicated to arrange. And thousands and thousands and thousands of European school children, particularly from France, used to come to the UK for just 2 or 3 days. I mean, I know people who've got shops in Canterbury, and the whole of Canterbury was full of school trips from France throughout the whole summer. That's all ended now because French children, apart from the fact that they probably don't want to come here, but French children now have to have passports, whereas previously they could come with ID cards. So that's another whole area that's gone, and of course, these people, even though children, spend a lot of money, and it was an opportunity for English children to get some experience of Europe and vice versa. But no, finished. There was another item I saw last week that in Chiswick in London, if you know London, you'll know that Chiswick is a very rich area. It's full of big, expensive houses. It's an area where a lot of television stars and actors live, a lot of rich people, and a lot of nice smart shops, boutiques and so on. Well, apparently Aled Jones, the singer come television presenter, he was approached by a boy, a 16-year-old with a machete, and the boy demanded his watch, which happened to be a £17,000 Rolex. Quite why you would go shopping with a £17,000 Rolex visible, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, the boy got away with the watch, but he was arrested. He was one of the very few that got caught. But the Daily Mail did a whole article about how the shops in Chiswick, this rich area, are all now having to lock their doors all day and just let one customer in at a time because there are so many incidences of shoplifting. I think in that area it's probably to fund drugs, but it's now so easy to commit crime, and we know there's been a lot of previous publicity about the growth of shoplifting, and it seems to me, as I've said many times before, that I think we are going to be facing a lot of crime in the next few months and years, because there are too many people who just have got probably no alternative. And it was lovely to see Michelle Mone in Mayfair. I think she's got a house in Mayfair actually, but she is as brazen as can be, as bold as brass. She's back in London, and she was seen arriving very expensively dressed at a restaurant called Scott's Restaurant. It's a very, very nice restaurant, again frequented by celebrities. It's a restaurant where food would cost you at least £100 a head, and the cheapest bottle of wine is £60. So for perhaps a couple to go and eat there, you look at £300 or £400. For her, that's nothing. That's nothing because we're paying for it, aren't we? We're paying for it out of all that money that she's managed to get out of that PPE contract, and she's one of dozens and dozens and dozens. She will never be arrested. She'll never pay the money back. She'll never go to prison. She just got away with it just by being persistent. She was the one who Michael Gove described as a pain in the arse, because she kept nagging him for a contract, and nothing will happen. And it's quite annoying. Again, as I say, there are people can't afford to feed their children. People go into to food banks, and there's this slapper, this woman, spending freely, openly, right in the heart of the scene of a crime. And lastly, John Curtis, the election expert, the pollster, and so on. He did a poll of polls regarding Brexit, because a lot of what I've been talking about all relates back to Brexit. And in this poll of polls, he found that 64% of people now, 64% think that it was wrong to leave the EU, and 36% think it was right. Of that 36%, I would imagine the majority are Tories, because it's Tories who voted for Johnson, Tories who voted to get Brexit done, and so on. And so you can say that of that minority, that 36%, probably maybe less than half are Labour supporters. And it's worth remembering that that small, maybe 18% of the population who voted Labour and who still think Brexit was right, they're the ones that Labour is targeting 100%. The whole front bench of Labour are targeting those people because they're the votes they want to go after. To hell with everybody else, to hell with all the people who say they can't vote Labour because of Starmer's attitude towards Brexit and making a success of it. And I see in my comments hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments, people saying, I just can't vote Labour, I can't vote for Starmer. But never mind, he's got that 18% he's focused on, and we will never, as he says time and time again, although I'm told he's lying about this, he said we'll never, ever, ever, under his leadership, go back into or attempt to rejoin the customs union single market or the EU. So all in all, it's a pretty depressing situation we're in already, and I think the future doesn't look much brighter. But anyway, that's what I think about it. If you watch this far, thank you very much. And once more, if you haven't already subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you do so. And so until next time, bye for now.